Marcus Chen's hand trembled as he reached for the door handle of room 318. He wasn't supposed to be here this early. His mother Alina had been hospitalized for 5 days now with what the doctors called severe pneumonia, complicated by her age and a weakened immune system. The prognosis had been cautiously optimistic just that morning when Marcus sat beside her bed, holding her fragile hand, promising he'd return after wrapping up a few urgent business calls. His fiancée, Diana, had insisted on staying with Alina. "You go take care of work," she'd said, her voice warm and reassuring as she squeezed his arm. "I'll sit with her, read to her, make sure she's comfortable. Your mother and I need more bonding time anyway." She'd smiled that radiant smile that had first captivated him 18 months ago. "Go, we'll be fine." Marcus had trusted her completely. Why wouldn't he? Diana had been nothing but devoted since they'd gotten engaged. She visited Alina regularly, brought her favorite pastries, remembered small details about her preferences. She seemed genuinely eager to become part of their small family. So when Marcus's afternoon conference call ended 2 hours earlier than expected, he decided to surprise them both. He stopped at the flower shop on Madison Avenue, the one Alina had taken him to as a child, and bought an enormous bouquet of white peonies, her absolute favorite. The florist had wrapped them in cream-colored paper with a silk ribbon, and Marcus carried them carefully through the bustling Manhattan streets, imagining his mother's face when she saw them. The hospital corridor was unusually quiet for 3 p.m. on a Thursday. Sunlight streamed through the western windows, creating elongated rectangles of gold on the polished floor. A nurse smiled at Marcus as she passed, and he nodded, feeling grateful, feeling lucky that his mother was in such good hands, that he had Diana to help shoulder this burden, that life, despite this health scare, was fundamentally good. Then he heard it. A muffled sound, almost imperceptible. A struggle, the sharp, frantic beeping of a medical monitor accelerating into alarm. His body responded before his mind could process. His feet moved faster. His heart began to hammer. The flowers in his hands suddenly felt absurd, inappropriate, wrong. Marcus pushed open the door to room 318. Time splintered into fragments. Diana stood over Alina's hospital bed, both hands gripping a pillow, pressing it down with focused intensity over his mother's face. Alina's small frame twisted beneath the thin hospital sheets, her aged hands clawing desperately at Diana's wrists, her fingers leaving red scratches on Diana's pale skin. Her legs kicked weakly, the movements of someone fighting for air they couldn't reach. And Diana's face. God, her face. It wasn't the face of the woman who laughed at his jokes over dinner. It wasn't the face that had looked up at him with tears of joy when he'd proposed on that rooftop in Brooklyn. It was a stranger's face, contorted with determination, with something cold and calculated and utterly devoid of the warmth he thought he knew. The bouquet hit the floor, white petals scattered across the linoleum like snow. "What are you doing?" The words tore from Marcus's throat, raw and disbelieving. Diana's head snapped toward him. The pillow fell from her hands, tumbling to the floor beside the bed. Alina's chest heaved as she gasped for air, horrible rasping sounds that would replay in Marcus's nightmares for months to come, the desperate gulps of someone who'd been drowning and suddenly broke the surface. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, nobody moved. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his brain refusing to reconcile what his eyes had just witnessed. This was Diana, his Diana, the woman who cried during romantic movies, who volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends, who'd spent hours helping him pick out the perfect engagement ring because she wanted something meaningful, not flashy. The woman who was supposed to walk down the aisle toward him in 4 months, wearing the vintage lace dress they'd found together in that boutique in Soho. But the woman staring back at him now, chest heaving, eyes wide with something that looked like panic mixed with calculation, was someone he'd never seen before. And in that crystalline moment of recognition, Marcus realized something that made his blood run cold. He had no idea who he'd been sleeping next to for the past 18 months. He'd shared his bed, his life, his mother, his future with a complete stranger. Marcus's paralysis shattered. He lunged forward, his body moving on pure instinct, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He shoved Diana away from the bed, not violently but firmly, putting himself between her and his mother like a human shield. Mom, look at me." His hands found Alina's face, cradling it gently as he tilted her head toward him. Her skin was clammy and pale, her lips tinged with blue. "Breathe, just breathe. I'm here now, I've got you." Alina's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, and filled with terror. They searched his face as if trying to confirm he was real, as if she'd been somewhere dark and couldn't quite believe she'd made it back. Her mouth opened and closed, trying to form words, but only those awful gasping sounds emerged. The heart monitor shrieked its alarm, the sound drilling into Marcus's skull. "It's okay," he whispered, though nothing was okay, nothing would ever be okay again. He smoothed her silver hair back from her damp forehead, his own hands shaking so badly he could barely control them. "You're safe, I promise, you're safe now." Behind him, Diana had backed against the far wall. She stood there frozen, her hands still curved as if they were gripping something. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, and when Marcus finally glanced back at her, she looked almost surprised, as though she hadn't expected him to walk through that door, as though her carefully laid plan had just collapsed. Marcus didn't look at her for long. He couldn't. If he did, if he really looked at her, he didn't know what he might do. The rage building inside him felt volcanic, dangerous. Alina's breathing began to slow, settling into a more regular rhythm. Her grip on Marcus's sleeve tightened, and her eyes finally focused on his face, truly seeing him. A single tear slid down her weathered cheek. Marcus, she breathed, his name barely audible. I'm here, Mama, I'm not going anywheres. The door burst open. Two nurses rushed in, their practiced eyes immediately assessing the scene. The screaming monitor, Alina gasping for breath, Marcus hovering over her, Diana pressed against the wall in the corner. One nurse, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and quick hands, moved straight to Alina's side, checking her vitals, adjusting her oxygen flow. The other, younger nurse looked between Marcus and Diana, her expression hardening as she began to piece together what might have happened. What's going on here? The older nurse demanded, her voice sharp with concern. Mrs. Chen, are you all right? Marcus turned slowly to face them. When he spoke, his voice was eerily calm, each word carefully placed. She tried to kill her. I walked in and Diana was holding a pillow over my mother's face. The room went absolutely silent except for the monitor, which was finally beginning to slow its panicked beeping as Alina's vitals stabilized. The younger nurse's eyes went wide. She immediately stepped toward the door, speaking quietly into the radio clipped to her scrubs. Security to room 318, possible assault, send security now. No, Diana's voice cracked as she pushed off the wall, her hands coming up in a gesture of supplication. No, you don't understand. Marcus, please, it's not what it looked like. I saw you. Marcus's voice remained level, but beneath it ran an undercurrent of barely contained fury. I saw your hands on that pillow. I saw my mother fighting you. She was choking, Diana's voice pitched higher, taking on a frantic quality. She started coughing really hard, and I was trying to help her sit up. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I was trying to help her. You were smothering her. No, Marcus, I swear I would never. I saw you. The finality in those three words seemed to hit Diana like a physical blow. She stumbled back against the wall again, her carefully constructed explanation crumbling. Her face crumpled, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks, but Marcus felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her, nothing but a cold, expanding emptiness where his love for her used to be. Marcus, please, Diana's voice broke. Please just listen to me for 1 second. Diana stopped abruptly, biting her lip. The room held its breath. She what? Marcus asked quietly. Diana shook her head, pressing her lips together, but the words had already started and they couldn't be contained. She was going to ruin everything. She was going to tell you to leave me, she. The sentence hung unfinished in the air, but it was enough, more than enough. The older nurse stepped back, her hand instinctively moving to cover her mouth. The younger one spoke more urgently into her radio, and Marcus just stared, truly understanding for the first time the depths of Diana's deception. Two security guards appeared in the doorway, their presence filling the small room with an authority that made everything suddenly, terribly real. One of them, a tall man with graying temples and a weathered face that had seen too much, stepped forward. Ma'am, he said, addressing Diana, his voice firm but not unkind, we're going to need you to come with us. Diana's eyes, red-rimmed and desperate, locked onto Marcus. Marcus, don't do this. We can talk about this, just you and me, away from all these people. Please, I love you. Everything I did because I love you. Can't you see that? Marcus turned away from H. He sat down slowly in the chair beside his mother's bed and took Alina's hand in both of his, cradling it like something precious and fragile. He didn't watch as the security guards approached Diana, didn't flinch when her voice rose, becoming shrill and pleading, didn't respond when she screamed his name over and over as they led her out of the room. He just held his mother's hand and tried to remember how to breathe. The room felt larger once Diana was gone, yet somehow more oppressive. The silence pressed in on Marcus from all sides, broken only by the steady beep of the heart monitor and his mother's gradually steadying breaths. Alina's fingers remained wrapped around his, holding on with surprising strength for someone who'd just been fighting for her life. Marcus couldn't look at her. Not yet. If he looked at his mother's face, if he saw the fear still lingering in her eyes, he might completely fall apart, and he couldn't afford that right now. He needed to be strong, needed to hold himself together, needed to be the son Alina had raised him to be. A doctor arrived within minutes, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She conducted a thorough examination while Marcus stood by, watching helplessly as she checked Alina's throat, her pulse, her oxygen levels, her neurological responses. Mrs. Chen, the doctor said gently, can you hear me? Alina nodded weakly. Can you tell me what happened? Alina's mouth opened, her voice emerged thin and damaged, each word clearly causing her pain. She. Don't, Marcus interrupted, his hand tightening around hers. Don't push yourself, Mama, just rest. The doctor's gaze shifted to Marcus, and he saw the question in her eyes. He answered it before she could ask. I witnessed it, he said flatly. I walked in and found Diana holding a pillow over my mother's face. My mother was fighting her, trying to get air. It wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding, it was deliberate. The doctor's expression remained professionally neutral, but Marcus caught the flash of anger that crossed her face before she controlled it. I see. Mrs. Chen is going to be fine physically, though she'll be sore for a few days and her throat may hurt from the trauma. We'll keep her tonight for observation and monitor her closely. She's very lucky you arrived when you did, Mr. Chen. Lucky, the word felt obscene. They weren't lucky. They'd been seconds away from tragedy, from an outcome Marcus couldn't even allow himself to imagine. The police will want to speak with both of you, the doctor continued. They're on their way. In the meantime, I'm going to increase Mrs. Chen's oxygen flow and give her something to help her rest. She's been through a significant trauma. After the doctor left, Marcus finally allowed himself to look at his mother, really look at her. The fear in her eyes had softened but hadn't entirely disappeared. She was watching him with an expression he recognized from his childhood, the look she'd worn when he came home with a scraped knee or a broken toy or his heart shattered by some small betrayal. It was pure maternal concern, worry for him despite what she'd just endured. I'm so sorry, Alina whispered, her damaged voice barely audible. Marcus's face crumpled. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against their joined hands. Mama, no, don't apologize, don't you dare apologize. I should have said something sooner, she continued, each word clearly causing her pain. I knew something wasn't right about her, the way she looked at you sometimes, like you were a prize she'd won, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when I was around. I felt it in my bones, Marcus, but I didn't want to interfere. I didn't want you to think I was a controlling mother who couldn't let her son be happy. Stop, Marcus's voice broke. He lifted his head and his eyes were wet. This isn't your fault, none of this is your fault. Diana's choices are hers alone, you hear me? Her lies, her deception, her violence, that's all on her. But if I had warned you properly, I wouldn't have listened. The admission hurt, but it was true. I would have told you that you were being overprotective, that you didn't understand her like I did, that you needed to give her a chance. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. God, I was so stupid. You weren't stupid, sweetheart, you were lonely, and she saw that and used it. The words hit harder than any accusation, because Alina was right. Marcus had been lonely. Despite his success, despite the empire he'd built, despite having everything he'd ever dreamed of professionally, he'd come home every night to an empty penthouse and felt the absence of connection like a physical ache. And Diana had filled that void so perfectly, so completely, that he'd never stopped to question whether it was real. The detectives arrived as the sun was setting, casting long shadows through the hospital room windows. They were a study in contrasts. Detective Sarah Morrison, a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, and Detective James Park, younger, perhaps 40, with a gentle manner that put people at ease. Marcus had asked them to wait until Alina was sleeping before conducting the interview. She'd finally dozed off after the doctor administered a mild sedative, her breathing even and peaceful, so different from the desperate gasping he'd witnessed hours earlier. In a small consultation room down the hall, Marcus told them everything. He started from the beginning, describing his arrival at the hospital, the flowers he'd bought, the sounds he'd heard that made him push open the door. He described in clinical detail what he'd witnessed: Diana's hands on the pillow, his mother's body struggling, the look on Diana's face. Detective Morrison took notes in a small leather notebook, her pen moving quickly across the page. And what did Ms. Reeves say when you confronted her? Marcus closed his eyes, replaying the scene. At first, she tried to claim my mother was choking, that she was trying to help, but then, he paused, the memory making his stomach turn. Then she said my mother was going to ruin everything, that she was going to tell me to leave Diana. The detectives exchanged a meaningful glance. Did she elaborate on what she meant by that? Detective Park asked gently. No, the security guards arrived before she could finish. Detective Morrison flipped back through her notes. Mr. Chen, had Ms. Reeves shown any signs of violent behavior before today? No, never, not even a hint of aggression or temper. She was, Marcus struggled to find the words. She was perfect, too perfect, I realize now. She always knew exactly what to say, how to act, what I needed before I even knew I needed it. I thought it meant we were compatible. I didn't realize it meant she'd been studying me. How long have you been together? 18 months. We met at a charity fundraiser for pediatric cancer research. She was there volunteering with the event planning team. Detective Morrison made another note. And when did you get engaged? 6 months ago, we were planning a fall wedding. Marcus's laugh was hollow. We'd already sent out save the dates. Mr. Chen, Detective Park leaned forward, his voice kind. I know this is difficult, but we need to ask. Do you know of any reason Ms. Reeves might want to harm your mother? Had there been conflict between them? Marcus shook his head. That's the thing, detective. There was no conflict, at least not that I saw. Diana seemed to adore my mother. She visited her regularly, brought her gifts, asked her advice about wedding planning. If my mother had concerns about Diana, she kept them to herself. She didn't want to interfere with my happiness. But your mother told Ms. Reeves she was going to ruin everything, Detective Morrison noted. That suggests there was some kind of conversation or confrontation we don't know about yet. I don't know what they discussed, Marcus admitted. My mother hasn't been strong enough to tell me details yet. The detectives asked more questions about Diana's background, her friends, her work, her habits. Marcus answered as best he could, but with each question, he realized how little he actually knew about the woman he'd planned to marry. He knew she worked in event planning. He knew she'd grown up in Connecticut. He knew her favorite restaurant and her coffee order and which side of the bed she preferred. But he didn't know her, he'd never known her. The interview ended with Detective Morrison handing Marcus her card. We'll be speaking with Ms. Reeves tonight. Mr. Chen, I want you to know that what you witnessed today, what you described to us, that's attempted murder. This isn't a domestic dispute or a misunderstanding. If the evidence supports your testimony, and I have no reason to believe it won't, Ms. Reeves is facing serious criminal charges. Marcus nodded numbly. Attempted murder. The words felt surreal, like they belonged in a television drama, not in his actual life. We'll need to speak with your mother when she's feeling stronger, Detective Park added. But there's no rush. Her health and recovery come first. After they left, Marcus sat alone in that small consultation room for a long time, staring at nothing, trying to process the impossible reality his life had become in the span of a few hours. It was 3 days before Alina felt strong enough to tell Marcus everything. 3 days of tests and observations, of nurses checking vitals and doctors monitoring her recovery, of Marcus barely leaving her side except to handle the absolute minimum of business emergencies. He delegated everything he could to his senior staff. Meetings were rescheduled, contracts were signed by his COO, and for the first time in 2 decades, Marcus Chen's company operated without him at the helm every single day, and it survived, thrived even. That realization sat uncomfortably in his chest. On the third evening, as golden hour light painted the hospital room in shades of amber and rose, Alina finally spoke about what had happened before Marcus arrived. She visited me every afternoon, Alina began, her voice still rough but stronger than it had been. Always around 2 o'clock after you'd gone back to work. At first, I was grateful. I thought it showed how much she cared about you, about our family. Marcus pulled his chair closer to the bed, holding his mother's hand. But over the past week, the conversations changed, Alina continued. She started asking me questions, strange questions, about your business, about your assets, about whether you'd ever updated your will, about what you wanted for your future. Alina's eyes found Marcus's. I started to feel like I was being interrogated, not visited. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Then 2 days before what happened, I told her I thought you and she should postpone the wedding. You what? Alina's grip on his hand tightened. I'd been watching her, Marcus, really watching, and I saw things that troubled me. The way she performed affection when others were around but went cold the moment we were alone. The way she checked her phone constantly, her face changing when she read certain messages. The way she talked about your money, your properties, your success, but rarely about you as a person. Marcus felt something cold settling in his stomach. So I told her that marriage is a serious commitment and that perhaps you both needed more time to truly know each other. I suggested waiting another year, maybe two. Alina's voice wavered. She smiled at me, Marcus, but it wasn't a kind smile, and she asked me if I'd already told you this. When I said I planned to discuss it with you that weekend, her entire demeanor changed. Changed how? She became cold, calculating. She asked me why I was trying to sabotage her relationship with you, why I couldn't just be happy for your happiness. I tried to explain that I wasn't sabotaging anything, that I just wanted you to be certain, but she wouldn't hear it. Alina's eyes filled with tears. She left that day without saying goodbye, and the next day when she came back, she barely spoke to me at all. She just sat in that chair, staring at me with this expression I couldn't read. Why didn't you call me? Marcus asked, though he knew the answer. Because I didn't want to be the overprotective mother who couldn't let go, Alina said sadly. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that stress and illness were making me paranoid, and then yesterday she came in and closed the door. She pulled her chair right up to my bed and said, Alina, I need you to understand something. Marcus and I are getting married in 4 months. Nothing is going to stop that, not illness, not doubts, not you. Marcus's blood ran cold. I told her I wasn't trying to stop anything, Alina continued, tears now flowing freely down her face. I just wanted what was best for you. And she laughed, Marcus. She actually laughed and said, what's best for Marcus is to be loved. And I love him. I love everything about him. I love his success, his generosity, his beautiful penthouse, and his complete devotion to the people he cares about. I love the life we're going to build together. And the way she said it, the emphasis she put on certain words, I knew then that she didn't love you. She loved what you represented. Mama. I told her I was going to talk to you, that I was going to share my concerns and let you make your own decision. I wasn't trying to control you, sweetheart. I just wanted you to have all the information. Alina's voice broke. She stood up then and looked at me for a long time. Then she said, you're not going to ruin this for me. I've worked too hard. And she walked out. Marcus felt like he couldn't breathe, and the next day came back with that smile again, that perfect smile. She was cheerful, chatty, brought me magazines and asked about my breakfast. It was like our conversation had never happened. I thought maybe I'd overreacted, that maybe everything would be okay. Alina's hand trembled in his. And then the nurse left to answer a call at the desk, and Diana stood up and closed the door. She came to the side of my bed and said, I'm sorry, Alina, but you should have kept quiet. And then she picked up the pillow. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of medical equipment. I tried to fight, Alina whispered, but I'm old and weak and she was strong and determined, I thought. I thought I was going to die, Marcus, and I was so angry because I wouldn't get to warn you, wouldn't get to tell you the truth. Marcus couldn't speak. He pulled his mother into his arms, gentle of her IV lines and monitors, and held her while they both cried for what had almost been lost, for the betrayal that had brought them to this moment, for the blindness that had nearly cost Alina her life. While Marcus held his mother, a very different scene was unfolding in an interrogation room at the 19th precinct. Diana Reeves sat across from Detectives Morrison and Park, her designer clothes wrinkled, her carefully applied makeup streaked from hours of crying. But her tears had dried now, replaced by something harder, more desperate. Ms. Reeves, Detective Morrison began, her voice neutral, can you tell us what happened in Mrs. Chen's hospital room this afternoon? Diana had told 3 different versions of the story already. First, that Alina was choking and she was trying to help. Then that she was adjusting Alina's pillows. Finally, that it was all a misunderstanding, that Marcus had walked in at an unfortunate moment and misinterpreted what he saw. But now, with her lawyer sitting beside her, with the reality of her situation setting in, Diana's mask began to crack. I need you to understand something, Diana said, her voice tight. I love Marcus, I genuinely love him. Everything I did for us, for our future together. Walk us through what happened, Detective Park said gently. Diana was quiet for a long moment, then slowly she began to speak. I've been planning this for 2 years, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Not what happened today, but meeting Marcus, getting close to him, making him fall in love with me. She looked up, meeting the detective's eyes defiantly. I know how that sounds, but do you have any idea how hard it is to survive in this city when you have nothing, when you're drowning in debt and your business has failed and you're 1 month away from being homeless? Tell us about your financial situation, Detective Morrison said. Deanna laughed, a bitter sound. What financial situation? My event planning company went bankrupt 18 months ago, not because I wasn't good at it, I was brilliant, but because my business partner embezzled everything and disappeared, left me with over $200,000 in debt. I lost my apartment, my car, everything. I was sleeping on friends' couches and working 3 different service jobs just to keep creditors at bay. So you targeted Marcus Chen, Detective Morrison stated. I researched him, Diana corrected. That charity gala where we happened to meet, I knew he'd be there. I knew his patterns, his interests, his type. I spent months preparing for that night, making sure I'd be everything he was looking for. She smiled without humor. And it worked. He fell for me exactly like I planned. And Mrs. Chen, Detective Park asked. Diana's expression hardened. Alina was never supposed to be a problem. She was sick, elderly, not expected to be around much longer anyway. I thought I'd just have to be patient, be the devoted future daughter-in-law, wait it out. But then she started getting suspicious, started asking questions, started suggesting Marcus, and I slowed down. So you decided to kill her? No, Diana's voice rose. I didn't decide anything. I panicked. She told me she was going to talk to Marcus, going to recommend we postpone the wedding. If Marcus listened to her, if he started questioning things, looking into my background more closely, he'd discover everything. The debt, the lies, the bankruptcy. He'd realize I wasn't the woman I'd pretended to be, and I'd lose everything I'd worked for. You'd lose access to his money, Detective Morrison said flatly. Diana slumped in her chair. You don't understand. When you have nothing, when you've lost everything and clawed your way back up and finally have a chance at security, at stability, at a life where you don't wake up every morning terrified of what bill you can't pay, you'll do things you never thought you were capable of. Including murder. I wasn't thinking, Diana said desperately. I was just standing there listening to Alina's breathing, thinking about how she was going to take everything away from me, and I picked up the pillow. It was instinct. I wasn't thinking about killing her. I was thinking about surviving. The confession hung in the air. Diana's lawyer closed his eyes, knowing his client had just sealed her fate. Ms. Reeves, Detective Morrison said quietly, you attempted to murder an elderly woman to maintain access to her son's wealth. That wasn't survival. That was calculated, premeditated violence. Diana's face crumpled. I love him, she whispered one more time, as if saying it enough times would make it true. I really do love him. But nobody in that room believed her, not even Diana herself. The news of Diana's arrest and the subsequent attempted murder charge spread through Marcus's social circles like wildfire. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends, colleagues, business associates, all expressing shock, concern, relief that Alina won. That's okay. Marcus answered none of them. He took a leave of absence from his company, something he'd never done in 15 years. His board of directors was initially panicked, but Marcus's second-in-command, a sharp woman named Jennifer who'd been with the company since its early days, stepped up seamlessly. The company didn't just survive without him at the helm every moment, it thrived. That realization was both humbling and liberating. Alina was released from the hospital after a week. Marcus moved her into his penthouse, setting her up in the spacious guest suite with its own bathroom and a view of Central Park. He hired a private nurse to help with her care, though he insisted on doing most of it himself. They fell into a rhythm, morning coffee together on the terrace, watching the city wake up. Afternoon walks around the apartment when Alina felt strong enough, her arm looped through his. Evening conversations that stretched long into the night, talking about everything and nothing, making up for all the years when Marcus had been too busy building his empire to simply be present. One evening, 2 weeks after the incident, they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. You know what I've been thinking about, Marcus said, breaking their comfortable silence. What's that, sweetheart? Dad? Alina went still. They hadn't talked about Marcus's father in years. I keep thinking about how you raised me alone after he left, Marcus continued. How you worked yourself to exhaustion, gave up everything, sacrificed your own happiness to make sure I had opportunities you never did, and I built this enormous company, made all this money, achieved everything society says matters. He paused. But I almost lost you because I was too busy, too distracted, too focused on success to recognize a threat right in front of me. Marcus. No, let me finish. He turned to face her. You gave me everything, Mama, not just financially, not just physically, but emotionally. You taught me what real love looks like. It's showing up, it's sacrifice, it's choosing someone every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. His voice cracked, and I forgot that. I started measuring my worth by my bank account instead of by my relationships. I thought providing for you was the same as being present for you. Alina reached over and took his hand. You've always been present in the ways that matter. No, I haven't, but I want to be. I want to be the son you deserve. You already are, Alina said softly. You saved my life, Marcus, not just physically, but in every way that counts. You came back, you listened to that voice inside you that said something was wrong. You chose me over your meetings, over your work, over everything else. That's what real love does. They sat in silence for a while, watching the city lights begin to flicker on below them. The prosecutors called today, Marcus finally said. Diana is taking a plea deal, 7 to 15 years for attempted murder. How do you feel about that? Alina asked gently. Marcus thought about it. Honestly, I don't feel anything, not anger, not satisfaction, just empty where she used to be, like a tooth that's been pulled. You know it's gone, but your tongue keeps going to the space where it was, expecting to find something. You're grieving, Alina said, not for who Diana really was, but for who you thought she was. That's normal. I keep replaying our entire relationship in my head, Marcus admitted, trying to figure out which parts were real and which were performance. And I can't tell anymore. Maybe none of it was real. Maybe every smile, every kiss, every intimate conversation was just her playing a role. Does it matter now? Marcus looked at his mother in surprise. What do you mean? I mean, does it matter whether any of it was real? You learned something important from Diana, even if she didn't intend to teach it. You learned the difference between performance and presence, between someone who loves what you have and someone who loves who you are. Alina squeezed his hand. Diana taught you what love isn't, and now you'll recognize what love is when you find it again. I don't know if I want to find it again, Marcus said quietly. I don't know if I can trust my judgment anymore. You will, Alina assured him. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually, because real love doesn't announce itself with grand gestures and perfect.